Humanity had changed a lot since the early days on Earth, but one thing had stayed the same: they were still survivors. Thousands of years of evolution on a dangerous world had shaped them. Earth had violent storms, explosive volcanoes, dangerous animals, and diseases that wiped out entire populations. Yet humans kept standing, kept fighting, and kept learning. Because of this history, the rest of the galaxy quietly called them Deathworlders. It wasn't an insult. It was more like a warning. Humans were tough, stubborn, and almost impossible to break. But at the same time, they had something the galaxy didn't expect: kind hearts and a strange habit of helping others even when there was no benefit. Across the galaxy, this reputation made humanity a bit mysterious. Some alien species admired them, some feared them, and some simply didn't understand how a species strong enough to fight giant predators could also be the same species that built hospitals, orphanages, and peace treaties. Humans confused everyone, and they seemed to enjoy it. Far away from human space lived a gentle alien species known as the Thalori. They were peaceful, artistic, and deeply connected to nature. Their cities were quiet and full of soft, glowing lights. Their culture valued harmony, learning, and balance. They never built weapons bigger than small patrol ships because they never imagined they would need more. 2. The Thalori War was something old and primitive, something they believed advanced civilizations avoided, but their belief was shattered when the Draken Imperium arrived. Without warning, the Draken were the opposite of the Thalori. Their entire empire was built on conquest, power, and fear. They believed strength was everything and compassion was weakness. When they saw the Thalori worlds, they didn't see peaceful cities. They saw resources. They saw labor. They saw another easy win. The Thalori were no match for them. Their ships were destroyed within minutes. Their colonies fell in days. They sent desperate calls for help to anyone who would listen. Most of the galaxy heard the message, but nobody answered. The Draken were too powerful, and no one wanted to risk their own worlds. The Thalori began to lose hope. Their last broadcasts were full of fear: families hiding underground, leaders begging for protection, children crying as the Draken ships arrived overhead. Their home system would be next. The entire species was on the edge of extinction, and they felt completely alone. But then something unexpected happened. Far across the stars, on a human deep space listening station, a technician picked up the Thalori distress signal. It was weak, full of static, and clearly a message of desperation. The technician didn't ignore it. Humans had once lived through disasters on their own world. They understood fear. They understood what it meant to call for help with no guarantee anyone would answer. So the message was immediately forwarded to the United Terran Council. The council met within hours. The room was filled with military leaders, diplomats, scientists, and representatives from many human colonies. They studied the recording carefully. Some were shocked by the brutality they heard. Others felt anger rising in their chests, but all of them felt something else: responsibility. Humans had always seen themselves as protectors of the innocent, even if the innocent lived light years away. Still, deciding to intervene wasn't simple. Helping the Thalori meant facing the Draken Imperium, a power known for its cruelty. The Draken destroyed anyone who opposed them. A war with them would not be a small conflict. It would be a storm that could swallow entire star systems. Human leaders knew this risk. They knew they might lose lives, ships, and worlds. They knew this could be the start of a long and difficult struggle. But they also knew something else. If they ignored the Thalori, the Draken would only grow stronger. A bully unchallenged becomes a bigger bully, and humans didn't tolerate bullies. In the middle of the discussion, the recording played again. A Thalori elder spoke through the static, her voice trembling. She said they had nowhere left to run. She said they didn't want to die. She asked for anyone to help them. That moment changed everything in the room. Every human there felt the same thing. They couldn't walk away from this. Humanity decided it was time to act up before sending their warships. However, humans took a different first step. They sent a diplomatic vessel, a peaceful ship carrying ambassadors, translators, and medical staff. They wanted to meet the Thalori face to face and understand exactly what they needed. This choice surprised the galaxy. While other species imagined humans as warriors, the humans themselves chose to start with compassion. They believed saving a species meant more than firing weapons. It meant understanding their pain, their culture, their fears, and their hopes. When the Thalori first saw the human ship arriving in orbit, they were confused. They had expected some small patrol or a quiet observer, not a delegation of humans willing to land on their damaged world. Many Thalori were too scared even to come out of hiding. They had seen what the Draken did. They didn't trust anyone anymore. But when the humans walked out of their ship, they didn't bring weapons in their hands. They brought medical kits. They brought translators. They brought food and supplies. The first thing they did was help an injured Thalori child. That moment changed how the Thalori saw humans forever. The ambassadors spoke with the Thalori leaders and listened carefully to everything they said. They didn't interrupt. They didn't promise impossible things. They simply listened. And that made the Thalori feel seen for the first time since the invasion began. When the human delegation returned home, they carried with them a full report of the horrors the Thalori had suffered. The council read every page. They saw images of burning cities, destroyed schools, and terrified families. They heard testimonies of survivors, and after seeing all of this, any hesitation vanished. Humanity made its decision. They would defend the Thalori, no matter the cost. Across human space, the call went out. The United Terran War Fleet was mobilized. These weren't ordinary ships. They were the pride of human engineering warships built to survive asteroid impacts, black hole radiation, and even planetary bombardments. Pilots prepared their fighters. Soldiers checked their armor. Engineers loaded supplies. Medics prepared for casualties. Every part of humanity moved as one. Even though they were known as Deathworlders, humans didn't go to war with joy. They went with determination. They went because someone needed them. They went because they believed the galaxy should be a place where kindness mattered more than brutality. As the fleet prepared to jump into Thalori space, a quiet hope spread across human colonies. They didn't just want to win. They wanted to prove something big, something the galaxy often forgot. The strongest species is not the one who conquers, but the one who protects. Far away, the Thalori watched the stars, wondering if their message had reached anyone. They had no idea that an entire human fleet was already on its way. They didn't know that humanity, the Deathworlders, had heard their cry. They didn't know that help was coming, but it was. In the cold silence of space, the engines of the Terran War Fleet roared to life, ready to travel across the galaxy for a species they had never met before. And at that moment, a new chapter in galactic history quietly began. Humanity was moving not for glory, not for conquest, but for something far more powerful: compassion. The Thalori had never seen humans before the day the diplomatic vessel landed on their damaged world. Their cities were in ruins, their forests burned, and their once peaceful skies were filled with smoke. When the human delegation stepped out, the Thalori felt a mix of fear and curiosity. They had heard stories of human stories about the Deathworlders who survived impossible conditions, who defeated predators larger than themselves, and who built machines stronger than mountains. To the Thalori, humans were like legends, powerful but unpredictable. They didn't know if humans had come to help or to take advantage of their weakness. But the first thing humans did was kneel beside an injured Thalori child and begin treating her wounds. That simple act changed the atmosphere. The Thalori guards lowered their weapons. Mothers stepped out from their hiding places. Elders approached slowly, watching with wide, hopeful eyes. No one had expected such gentleness from a species known for strength. This was the moment when the Thalori began to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone truly cared. The human diplomats spent days listening to the Thalori leaders. They walked through the destroyed streets, seeing the damage for themselves. They visited shelters where families huddled together, terrified that the Dracon would return at any moment. A human doctor cried quietly after seeing a nursery that had been bombed. A soldier clenched his fists so hard that his gloves tore slightly. Even the ambassadors, trained to stay calm, could not hide the sorrow on their faces. They sent detailed reports back home. Every video, every message, every image went straight to the United Terran Council. The more the council saw, the more the tension grew. Some members were furious, demanding immediate military action. Others were cautious, warning that the Dracon Imperium was unlike any enemy humanity had faced before. A war with them would be massive and dangerous, but one thing was clear: the Thalori needed help now. They had no army, no defensive fleets, and no allies brave enough to stand with them. Their home system was only weeks away from falling. When the human delegation returned to Earth, the council gathered for an emergency meeting. The ambassadors described everything they had seen: the burned cities, the destroyed schools, the fear in the Thalori's eyes. They explained how the Dracon treated the Thalori people like objects, not living beings. They talked about the recordings of Dracon soldiers shouting orders, firing without mercy, and dragging families from their homes. Every person in the room felt a cold anger rising inside them, but anger alone couldn't guide a decision. Entering this conflict meant risking the lives of thousands of human soldiers and millions of civilians. The Dracon Imperium controlled many star systems, and they had a fleet powerful enough to crush most civilizations. The war would not be quick. It would not be easy. It would not be bloodless. Still, as the discussion continued, something else became clear. If humanity didn't step in, no one would. Other nations had already refused, too scared to challenge the Dracon. The Thalori were alone, and they would not survive much longer. The council members looked at each other, and slowly, they reached an understanding. If humans truly believed in compassion, justice, and protecting the innocent, then they had no choice. They voted, and humanity chose to fight. Orders spread across human space faster than light. Fleets were called back from distant patrols. Shipyards worked non-stop to restock ammunition and repair old vessels. Pilots were summoned from their families. Soldiers trained harder than ever before. The sound of engines, the shouts of commanders, and the hum of energy shields filled the air. Everyone knew they were preparing for a war unlike any other. In the center of all this activity was the Deathworlder war fleet, humanity's most powerful force. These ships had survived battles with asteroids, plasma storms, and hostile species. Their armor was thick enough to withstand direct hits. Their weapons were strong enough to shatter carrier ships. Their design looked almost aggressive, with sharp angles, heavy plating, and glowing engines. Other species often compared them to giant beasts of steel. But even powerful ships weren't enough. Humans needed information. They needed to understand the Draken's strategies, numbers, and weaknesses. So intelligence officers worked day and night, gathering everything they could find. They studied old battles, analyzed enemy movements, and tried to predict what the Drakon would do next. They discovered something terrifying. The Draken weren't just destroying the Thalori, they were planning to enslave them. This news fueled humanity's determination even more. Soldiers who had never met a Thalori felt a surge of protective anger. They thought about what it meant to lose your home, your culture, your freedom. Many humans had histories of their own ancestors fighting similar battles. They understood the pain of oppression. Meanwhile, the Thalori continued to struggle. Their food supplies were running low. Their medical stations were overwhelmed. Families lived underground, afraid to come out during the day. Sometimes, they saw shadows of Draken ships passing overhead. The fear of another attack never left their minds. Every night, the Thalori prayed for someone to save them, even though they didn't know if their message had truly reached anyone. Then one day a new ship appeared in their sky. It wasn't a small diplomatic vessel this time. It was massive, shining with the lights of a human battleship. More ships followed, dozens of them. The Thalori people came out from their shelters, staring in disbelief. This was not a scouting mission. This was not a small show of support. This was a fleet. But before the fleet could fight, the humans needed to understand the exact situation. So the ambassadors returned to the Thalori planet one more time, this time accompanied by military leaders. They asked detailed questions about the Draken movements, attack patterns, and recent invasions. The Thalori elders provided maps, recordings, and everything they knew. The humans listened quietly. They didn't interrupt. They didn't rush. They took notes carefully, trying to make sure no detail was missed. They understood that one mistake could cost thousands of lives. Finally, the highest-ranking human admiral stood up and told the Thalori the truth. The battle would be dangerous. The Drakon would not retreat easily. There would be losses. There would be risks. But humanity would not abandon them. The Thalori would not face this war alone anymore. When the Thalori heard this, many of them began to cry. Some hugged the humans. Some simply bowed. For the first time since the invasion began, hope felt real. The humans didn't come for reward. They didn't come to conquer. They came because the Thalori had asked for help, and humans believed in answering cries for help. Back in space, the human fleet moved into formation around the Thalori home system. Captains issued final commands. Pilots strapped into their fighters. Ground forces prepared for possible land battles. Every soldier felt the weight of the mission. But they also felt a powerful sense of purpose. The rising challenge wasn't just the war ahead. It was the responsibility of protecting a species that had placed all their trust in humanity. It was the pressure of facing a brutal enemy. It was the knowledge that one wrong move could doom the Thalori forever. And yet, even with all of that, humans were not afraid. They had faced death before. They had survived impossible odds. They had overcome dangers that would destroy most species. They knew the path ahead would be long and full of danger. But they also knew something fundamental about themselves. Humanity always fought hardest when they were defending someone who couldn't defend themselves. The Thalori watched from their planet as the human ships formed a protective shield around their world. For the first time, they slept a little easier. For the first time, they felt protected. For the first time, they believed in a future. The humans were ready. The Draken Imperium had no idea what was coming. A storm was gathering, a storm powered by courage, compassion, and the unbreakable will of a species that refused to let innocence be destroyed. The rising challenge had begun, and humanity was fully prepared to face it. Asterisk, the Thalori home system had never been so tense. Every person, young or old, watched the sky with a mix of fear and hope. The human fleet had arrived to protect them, but the Drakon Imperium was already close. The air felt heavy, as if the entire planet knew that something huge was about to happen. The humans were preparing for battle, and the Thalori could sense their determination. But even the bravest hearts trembled when the Draken finally appeared. The warning came from a human scout ship on the edge of the system. Their voice crackled across the communication channel. Multiple Draken warships detected. They are entering Thalori space. The word spread through the fleet like an electric shock. Officers rushed to their stations. Pilots ran to their fighters. The giant engines of human battleships came alive with a deep, thunderous hum that echoed through space. That this was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The human admiral stood at the center of the flagship's command room, watching the holographic map light up with red markers. Each red dot was a Draken ship, destroyers, cruisers, and even a massive command carrier. The Draken weren't here to negotiate. They had come to finish what they started. They expected the Thalori to surrender, as they always did, and when they saw humans waiting in formation, they laughed. To them, the humans were just another obstacle, one they believed they could crush easily. They had no idea what humans were capable of. As the Draken fleet approached, they sent a message across all channels. Their commander spoke with a cold, mocking tone. He said humans were foolish for interfering. He said the Thalori were already theirs. He said humanity would be destroyed, just like every other species that dared to resist the Drakon. In PERIUM. The humans didn't reply with threats. They didn't waste time arguing. The admiral simply responded, "You will not harm these people any longer." And then he cut the communication. The entire human fleet went silent, their weapons warming up, their shields glowing brighter. It was like the calm before a storm when the first shots fired. Space exploded with light. The Draken launched a massive barrage of plasma torpedoes, hoping to overwhelm the human ships quickly. But human shields absorbed the hit, glowing blue under the impact. Then the human fleet fired back powerful energy beams that cut through the darkness like lightning. The battle had officially begun. Human pilots flew their fighters with incredible skill, dodging enemy fire and weaving between explosions. Their ships were fast, built for high-pressure environments that no other species could survive. The Draken didn't expect such speed. They lost several fighters in the first minutes, but the Drakon were relentless. They pushed forward, sending more waves of ships and firing heavier weapons. The space around the Thalori planet became a firestorm of colors and explosions. Human ships shook under the impact, crew members gripping their stations as alarms blared on board the TFS Resolute, the flagship. The situation became critical. A group of Draken boarding ships managed to latch onto its hull. Before the crew could stop them, Draken soldiers breached the airlock and flooded inside. They were tall, armored, and terrifying, roaring as they charged through the corridors. The humans met them head. This wasn't just a space battle anymore, this was close combat. Draken soldiers were strong, but humans had something they didn't expect: the endurance and stubbornness of a species that grew up fighting nature itself. The halls filled with the sound of metal clashing, boots running, and battle cries. A human squad, outnumbered but not afraid, held the line near the engine core. They knew if the Draken reached that area, the whole ship could be lost. Their captain shouted orders even as sparks flew above their heads. Meanwhile, the admiral watched the fleet begin to take heavy damage. Several human ships had already been hit hard. One destroyer lost power and drifted helplessly, still firing its last energy bolts until it finally exploded in a burst of white light. The crew sacrificed themselves to protect the others. The admiral closed his eyes for a moment, honoring them silently, then continued giving orders. There was no time to mourn, not yet. The turning point came from the ground. Troops to Draken had taken control of a Thalori moon earlier in the invasion. It was a strategic location full of communication towers and fuel depots. As long as the Draken controlled that moon, they could coordinate their attacks and overwhelm the human fleet. So the humans made a bold decision: send their toughest ground soldiers to retake it. The drop pods launched from orbit, burning through the atmosphere like shooting stars. The Draken ground forces were waiting, confident they could crush any invaders, but they were not prepared for Deathworlder soldiers. When the humans landed, they moved with unbelievable energy. They fought through toxic dust storms. They climbed jagged cliffs under enemy fire. They pushed through traps and ambushes. The Draken were used to fighting weak, scared species. They were not used to fighting human creatures, who adapted instantly and pushed harder with every challenge. Draken commander shouted in disbelief as the humans broke through their outer defenses. He had never seen soldiers fight like this. They didn't retreat. They didn't slow down. They didn't tire. It was like fighting a force of nature. On the moon's surface, the battle reached its peak in the central control facility. The humans charged in with explosive force, clearing room after room. Their leader, covered in dust and blood, raised the Terran flag over the captured station. That signal was sent to the fleet. It changed everything. The Draken fleet suddenly lost their ground support, communications and reinforcement channels. Their formation broke. Their attacks lost coordination. Confusion spread through their ranks. The human admiral saw the opening and acted instantly. He ordered a full assault. The human ships moved in perfect synchronization, firing everything they had. The Draken's main carrier took a direct hit to its engines and exploded, sending debris across the battlefield. That was the moment when the Draken lost the will to fight. Their ships began pulling back, trying to retreat. Humans didn't chase them far. They weren't there to conquer, only to protect. But they made sure the Draken knew they had been defeated. On the TFS Resolute, the Draken boarders were finally pushed out. The human soldiers who survived stood together, exhausted but victorious. The corridors were damaged, smoke-filled, and scattered with debris, but the ship held strong. They had protected their home, their allies, and each other. Across the Thalori world, cheers echoed. Families hugged each other. Elders cried tears of relief. Children looked up at the sky with wonder, watching the final flashes of battle fade away. They knew they had been saved not by a miracle, but by the courage of a species they barely understood. The humans, too, felt the weight of what they had done. They had risked everything. They had fought with everything they had, and they had won. The escalation had been brutal. The critical moment had pushed them to their limit. But humanity did not break. They stood firm. They faced a terrifying enemy and protected a species that had no one else. And now, the galaxy would never forget it. The explosions stopped slowly, like thunder fading after a long storm. The battlefield in space grew quiet, and for the first time since the fight had begun, the Thalari home system felt a small breath of peace. Smoke from burning ships drifted across the void. Broken pieces of metal floated silently, and the bright flashes of plasma fire were gone. The Draken fleet, which had once looked huge and unstoppable, was now retreating, broken and confused. Their command carrier had been destroyed, their ground forces cut off, and their confidence shattered. They were running, not marching, not advancing, not threatening, running. Inside the human flagship, the admiral finally allowed himself to breathe. He leaned on the command table, staring at the holographic map as it changed from red enemy markers to empty space. Officers around him reported damage, losses, and incoming messages. But underneath all the noise, there was a feeling spreading through the ship: victory. It wasn't loud or celebratory yet, but it was there, a quiet, powerful relief. On the Thalori planet below, the news spread fast. People who had been hiding in bunkers stepped outside for the first time in days. Children looked up at the sky, their glowing eyes wide with wonder as human ships floated protectively above them. Elders hugged each other, trembling with gratitude and disbelief. Some fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the idea that they were still alive. The Draken had been forced to retreat, something that had never happened in Thalari history. But the battle wasn't the end. Humans didn't leave the Thalori alone after the fighting stopped. They knew the war had burned homes, destroyed farms, collapsed hospitals, and left thousands wounded. The first thing they did after securing the system was send medical teams and engineers to the surface. Human dropships landed gently in the damaged cities, not with weapons drawn, but with crates of food, medicine, and repair tools. Doctors rushed into makeshift shelters, treating the injured with urgency and care. Engineers spread out across the ruins, scanning broken structures and figuring out how to rebuild them safely. They put up temporary power lines, fixed communication towers, and created emergency water systems. They didn't complain. They didn't demand anything. They simply worked, tirelessly, as if the Thalori were their own people in one town. A group of human medics found a collapsed school. Under the rubble, they discovered dozens of children still alive but trapped. The humans didn't wait for machines. They used their own hands to pull away heavy debris, worked through the night, and freed every child. The Thalori who watched couldn't believe the strength and kindness humans showed. They saw tears in the humans' eyes when they lifted each child out. It didn't matter that they were from different worlds. In that moment, they were just people helping people. Human engineers also helped repair the orbiting stations that had been damaged by the Drakon attacks. Those stations were important for communication and planetary defense. Without them, the Thalori would be vulnerable again. The humans upgraded the technology, installing stronger shields and faster communication systems. The Thalori were amazed at how quickly humans worked. They had expected months of repairs, but the humans completed in weeks what would normally take years. Even the human soldiers, known for their toughness in battle, were gentle during the recovery. They helped carry supplies, built shelters, protected refugee centers, and played with Thalori children when they had a spare moment. Some of the soldiers even learned a few Thalori words to comfort the families they met, while humans repaired and helped on the ground. The Terran Council contacted the Draken Imperium. This time, the tone of the message was very different. There were no threats, but the message was firm and clear. If the Draken returned to harm the Thalori, humanity would defend them again, and next time the consequences would be even worse. The Draken, weakened and humiliated, didn't respond immediately. They weren't used to losing. Their pride had been crushed by humans who had not only beaten them in battle, but also protected their victims with fierce loyalty. The Draken were confused. They couldn't understand why humans would risk so much for a species they barely knew. Their entire empire believed in power, fear, and domination, concepts so different from human compassion that they couldn't make sense of it. But the message from humanity was clear. The galaxy was not a place the Draken could terrorize without resistance anymore. When the fighting was finally over, the Thalori gathered in their capital city for a meeting with the human leaders. The city was damaged, the buildings cracked, and the streets dusty. But people came from every corner of the planet to witness the moment. The Thalori Council thanked the humans with trembling voices. They spoke about how they had expected to die, how they had lost hope, and how humanity's arrival had saved their entire species. One Thalori elder stepped forward and took the human admiral's hand in hers. She thanked him not just for fighting, but for caring. She said the Thalori would never forget what humanity had done. Her words made many humans quiet and emotional. They had come to help because it felt right, not because they wanted praise or reward. Hearing such sincere gratitude touched them deeply. The Thalori Council then announced something important. They wanted to form an official alliance with Earth, not just a temporary agreement, but a lasting friendship and oath that the two species would stand together, share knowledge, and protect each other. It was a historic moment. Never before had the Thalori joined an alliance like this. They were a peaceful species, and they had always avoided political or military commitments, but humanity had proven themselves through actions, not promises. and because of that, the Thalori trusted them fully. When the alliance was signed, cheers echoed across the planet. Thalori families waved glowing ribbons in celebration. Human soldiers smiled and nodded proudly. The human ambassadors shook hands with Thalori leaders, feeling the weight of a bond that would shape the future of both species. In the following weeks, humanity continued helping the Thalori rebuild. They didn't leave after the victory because they knew recovery was just as important as defense. The Thalori learned human engineering techniques, and humans learned about Thalori culture, art, and traditions. The two species grew close quickly, bonding through shared struggle and mutual respect. Slowly, the fear that had smothered the Thalori people began to fade. Their cities shone again. Their forests began to regrow. Children played without fear. Families rebuilt their homes. Their world started to heal. The Draken Imperium, meanwhile, felt the shift in the galaxy. For the first time, someone had stood up to them and won. Their leaders were forced to reconsider their strategies. They realized they could no longer expand without consequences. A powerful new message had spread through the stars. Humanity would not tolerate cruelty, and they had the strength to stop it. For the humans, the resolution was not about glory. It was about fulfilling a promise, protecting those who needed protection, showing that kindness could stand against brutality, and proving that even the strongest species could choose to fight for peace instead of domination. The battle was over. The danger had passed, and for the first time in a long time, hope shone brightly in the Thalori skies. Humanity had kept their word. They had come when asked. They had fought bravely. And now, they were helping rebuild everything the Drakon had tried to destroy. The resolution was more than victory. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one built on trust, courage, and the powerful idea that compassion could change the galaxy. When the fighting finally ended and the silence spread through the stars, it did not feel like victory at first. It felt like a strange emptiness, the kind that comes after too much noise, too much fear, and too many moments where life balanced on a thin line. Humanity's war fleet drifted quietly in formation, their weapons powered down, their engines glowing softly like tired hearts catching their breath. For the first time in months, no enemy signals echoed across the communication channels. No alarms, no warnings, just stillness, vast and deep. Captain Rian stood on the bridge of the Argent Dawn, staring out at the battlefield that was now only a field of broken metal, silent ships, and dim sparks fading into the darkness. A few hours earlier, this place had been chaos, explosions blooming across the stars, enemy warships tearing through space, and humanity's Deathworlder fleet pushing forward with fierce determination born from the promise they had made to the desperate alien alliance. Now, it was only the memory of war floating in the void. He felt the weight of everything that had happened pressing against him, every decision he made, every risk he took, every life that was saved and every life that was lost. It was not pride he felt. It was something different, something heavier yet calmer. It was understanding. Humanity had fought not for power, not for land, not for control. They fought because someone asked for help, and humans did not walk away from a cry for help. Not then, not now, not ever. Other fleet commanders began reporting in. Many of their voices trembled slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. Some sounded relieved, others stunned, and a few struggled to speak at all after losing so many people. Rian listened to every voice, honoring each one. These people had seen horrors most species would never even imagine. They had charged into battles that should have broken them. They had stood when the universe expected them to fall. But they didn't fall. They endured. Soon messages from the alien alliance started pouring in. Gratitude, disbelief, or sometimes all mixed together in frantic tones. The entire worlds were crying out in relief, their people celebrating because they were finally safe. They spoke of humanity with a kind of admiration that felt overwhelming. They called them saviors, protectors, warriors of impossible resilience. Some even called them legends. But humans were not legends. They were simply beings who refused to let fear decide the fate of others. On one world, millions gathered to send a broadcast to the fleet. The message showed crowds cheering, waving glowing banners, calling out the names of ships and commanders. When they mentioned the Argent Dawn, Rian looked away from the screen, a bittersweet ache growing in his chest. His ship had survived, but many others had not. The cheers did not erase that truth. Heinarel Varan, the leader of the alien alliance, requested a direct call. When his face appeared on the holodisplay, his eyes were red, filled with tears he made no attempt to hide. He saluted the captain with a trembling hand that showed just how deeply he felt everything. "You have done the impossible," Varan said. "You have saved us. Not just our army, not just our lands or entire species. We are alive because humanity stood with us." Rian shook his head gently. "You asked for aid. We answered. That's all." Varan released a shaky laugh, partly amazed and partly disbelieving. "You say it like it was simple, but no other species would have done what you did. You faced an enemy that terrified the whole galaxy. You fought when you had nothing to gain. You sacrificed without hesitation. Why? Why would your people risk so much for strangers?" Rian looked around at his crew before answering. Some were injured, others exhausted, many still processing what had happened. Yet every one of them remained at their post. steady and strong. "We did it," he said quietly. "Because life is worth defending, any life, and because if the roles were reversed, we would hope someone would do the same for us." Varen bowed his head respectfully. It was not a simple gesture in his culture. It was the highest honor, given only to those they considered family. Rian felt humbled, unprepared for such devotion from someone he had met only during war. After the call ended, the fleet began the long process of returning home. Ships moved slowly, carefully navigating through the debris fields. Medical teams shuttled between vessels, carrying the wounded. Engineers worked to stabilize engines damaged in the fighting. Each ship carried scars, both visible and unseen. On the Argent Dawn, the mood was quiet but not heavy. It was the calm that arrived after surviving something that should have been impossible. People talked in soft voices, sharing stories of close calls, sharing memories of lost comrades, sharing hopes of the lives waiting for them back on Earth. Some laughed with relief, some cried, and some simply sat silently, letting the reality sink in. Rian walked through the corridors, checking on his people one by one. He thanked them, encouraged them, listened to them. He carried their struggles as if they were his own, because in many ways they were. A captain's strength came not from command, but from understanding the hearts of those who followed him. By the time the fleet reached human space, Earth had prepared a massive welcome. Stations lit up with bright colors, cruisers formed escort lines, and transmissions flooded in. Families sent messages filled with love and tears. Leaders sent speeches full of praise and respect. Children recorded short clips saying thank you to the heroes of the stars. Even people who had never cared about military matters stopped their routines to honor those returning. But Rian knew that truth war heroes were still human. They carried wounds no celebration could heal. Some scars were visible, some hidden deep inside. And even though the war was over, it would take time before the fear faded completely from their memories. When the ships landed and the crew stepped out, a wave of sound engulfed them. Cheers, music, applause. Reporters swarmed around, asking endless questions. Rian answered some, but not many. He preferred to let the story belong to the entire fleet, not just himself. A small group of children approached him shyly, holding a handmade banner that read, "Thank you for saving our friends." Rian knelt down and smiled at them, feeling warmth spread through his chest. The children knew nothing of politics or strategies. They only understood kindness and bravery. Sometimes, that was enough. Days passed, then weeks. The galaxy slowly returned to its normal rhythm. The alien alliance rebuilt their cities, their borders, their trust in the universe. Humans helped them, sending supplies, engineers, doctors, anyone who could offer support. They had started this journey together, and they would finish the recovery together. Rian was invited to visit the main world of the Alliance. He accepted. When he arrived, the people greeted him with a celebration that stretched across cities. Statues were not built because humans rejected such displays, but murals were painted, vivid scenes of the fleet arriving through the darkness, of ships fighting side by side with alien defenders, of Rayon speaking with Varen before the final battle. But the murals did not make Rian feel like a hero. They made him feel responsible. They reminded him of everything at stake, everything that could have been lost. During his visit, Rian walked through schools where children learned about the war, not as a lesson in violence but as a lesson in unity and courage. He visited families who had survived because of the fleet. He met soldiers who fought on the ground, thanking him for giving them a chance to keep their homeland safe. And everywhere he went, he saw hope stronger, brighter, and more determined than before. Hope was the true victory. Late one evening, as he stood on a balcony overlooking a glowing alien city, Varen joined him. The two stood in quiet companionship, watching the lights flicker like living stars. "You changed us," Varen said softly. Rian looked at him, puzzled. "How you showed us what real strength looks like. Not the strength of weapons or armies, the strength of compassion. The strength to stand beside someone who is weaker. The strength to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Rian took a slow breath. "We just did what was right." "Yes," Varen said, "and that is why the galaxy will never forget you." As Rian prepared to return home, he realized something important. This war had not only changed the aliens, it had changed humanity as well. Humans were known across the stars as Deathworlders, creatures shaped by harsh environments and dangerous evolution. But now, they were also known as something else. Protectors, allies, friends. The Alliance promised that humanity would always have a place among them, not as soldiers, but as partners in peace. And for the first time, humanity saw a future where they were not alone, where many species stood together, stronger as one than they ever were divided. When Rian finally returned to Earth and walked through the quiet halls of his ship one last time, he felt a deep sense of closure. The war fleet he once commanded was now a symbol of hope across galaxies. The battles they fought would be told as stories for generations, not stories of destruction, but stories of courage, unity, and the extraordinary spirit of humanity. He paused near a window and looked out at the stars. Each one held countless worlds, countless lives, countless chances to help or harm. And he knew, without doubt, that humanity would choose help every time the universe had asked for aid. Humanity answered, and the echoes of that answer would live on forever.